Hey, welcome back to Innovate Africa. As you know by now, I'm Kino Cummings. I keep you company each and every week. And you and I listen to founders who run businesses that are innovative and impact Africans' lives. This week, I want to focus on education. To me, it's a bugbear. Private schools, government schools, I don't think are going far enough. Yes, there are some who are trying really hard. Far enough to where exactly, Kino, you might be asking? Well, when it comes to preparing our young people, our learners, our students for the future. Now, there is one school that really stands out for me. They don't get everything right. They're not 100% perfect, but their take on high school education really got my attention. So let me introduce you to Jevron Epstein. Jevron, the CEO of Generation Schools. Thank you very much for joining us. Been wanting to get you in for quite some time. Let's talk about Generation Schools. Yes, I know you're into education, right? So that's not the question. The question is, what business are you in as a school?
Kino, thanks. Good question, difficult question. But to the point of Generation Schools, it was established and exists to change the paradigm of education. Not to fix it for everybody, but to shorten the span of a student going to school and getting a job. So connecting real-world applications such as careers and jobs with students who are trying to navigate and find their way. That's simple.
Okay, but now when you say shorten, what exactly do you mean?
So what I'm a fond believer that secondary education is extinct and that tertiary education should be in the space of secondary schooling.
100% right. Now, this is the very reason why I actually like what you're doing. I agree totally. But when you say that tertiary needs to move to secondary, just unpack that for me in more tangible detail, Jevron.
Yeah, so Generation Schools is an established Cambridge International school. So we do what the rest of the schools globally do, IGCSEs, A-levels, that give you credits to go to university. We also have an alternative pathway, which sees secondary education become extinct, and a student leaves with us with an undergrad degree. How undergrad degrees work is it's a great form of general education. Whether it's a Bachelor of Commerce or Bachelor of the Arts degree, they are generally generalist qualifications. And once you've done your undergrad, you would generally specialize. What I find interesting in conventional schooling is that you specialize before you generalize. So therefore, if you look at mathematics, you'll go in depth in maths from conventional times table all the way to calculus and trigonometry, which is it's specializing to the unfortunately the detriment of the child, because some children don't want to know what calculus is. Some children are never going to utilize trigonometry. So very simply for us, secondary schooling morphs into tertiary education. Students leave us at the ages of 18 or 19 with an honors undergrad degree.
You're talking about these degrees, but what exactly do you specialize in as a school?
So we specialize in 4 areas, specifically in commerce, so business, anything from conventional finance degrees to Islamic banking understanding. We then have computer science, specifically computer engineering, anything from cloud security, front end, back end, full stack development. We then have sports, so the full range of sporting qualifications and degrees, and then teaching degrees. All 4 of these qualifications we have deemed to be applied sciences, so application-based qualifications that you might even classify as vocational, and those are foci. In terms of new qualifications that are entering our market space, it's psychology and travel and tourism, just internationally demands for those qualifications. And unfortunately, in our country, if you study at one university and you decide to leave, you can only transfer 50% of the credits. So not to break any rules for any of those rule creators and rule makers out there, we offer this as what you would classify an extracurricular activity. We help students collect credits to get a 360 credits that they require to have a degree, and these degrees come from a range of 460 institutions in the UK. We do not sell these qualifications as degrees. They are sold as extracurricular activities for all those rule makers.
The bottom line should be about skills development, surely. This is why we do what we do and why you do what you do, right? Surely young people who leave Generation should be functional entrepreneurs and should add value to the businesses who hire them. Should they leave school and go and work for a business directly, for example?
Kino, I'd love to say yes. I'd love to say yes, we've nailed that. Kids that leave us are exceptional. What I can tell you right now is that kids leave us, they have degrees. And they have degrees at the ages of 18 and 19. That's impressive to future employers. In terms of what we still have to achieve is a complete understanding of the commercial sector. So yes, we do have students that are in business. Yes, they run businesses. Would I say we are proficient in that yet? The answer is no. And I think it's good to be honest, because it's a space that we're working on. And I think if there was any innovation still to happen in our current qualification framework, it is for our kids to leave our entity making fortunes versus leaving and having jobs. But at the worst case scenario, all of our students get jobs. They're all employed. I'd love to see more entrepreneurs and big names in commerce coming out of our environment, but it is still a new program. We've had 250 students move through this program, all of them employable, all of them have jobs, and all of them creating their own lives. But that is our next reiteration to what we are doing, is embedding this in a career aspiration of making money.
Jevron, degrees are one thing, but what about immersion? I like technical schools because you get practical immersion. I love the old, diplomas you used to do at a Pentec, now CPUT, where you had to do in-service training. So let's talk about the immersion aspect when it comes to generation schools and the type of practical skills that your students, your learners, are actually left with.
Yeah, I think I think the hard work is to dismantle the structures of education. So we've done that right. We've cracked the code. It's a good storyline. Parents see it as a good option. I think you are spot on. Our evolution that we're going to go through now is exactly that, where you bring in the work experience into that space. However, that being said, when you're studying a degree, there's a lot that is required to obtain an honors degree. So the students are working. What I do find interesting, Kino, is that we have completely immersed ourselves in AI technology. So with students doing their degree, generally what will happen in conventional schooling is that you learn content and then write the assessment. We start with the assessment first. So we unpack the variables of what is required from a student's perspective, and the students then workshop the content themselves. And using our AI technologies, they create the content for their assignments that provides them the answers to their assessment. So it's a whole different way of looking at education. So I'm very glad that we've cracked this ability for students to get wisdom. Our next phase is for that wisdom to transcend into the work world. We do see that it works well for these students. They maintain their jobs, they build their careers, they work anywhere from the financial sector all the way to the automobile industries. And the way that they're able to obtain information and create wisdom from it is what's making them successful. It's not necessarily the conventional tasks that they would perform at an office space.
Now, there's a massive demand in the workplace for generative AI skills, for example. Why? Because it brings productivity to the workplace. How much generative AI skills training do you do at the school? A lot of businesses use it for that productivity. And if a learner, student leaves your school with sufficient skills in generative AI, for example, it could certainly give them the edge. So tell me more about that.
Yes, we've started with before ChatGPT came out. There was Penquill, and our students have been using large language model abbreviations and large language model understanding since the dawn of AI. So we fully adopt it. We subscribe to it. We obviously have AI detectors in our organization. But the interesting thing it's exactly what you just said. It's the heavy lifting that's required. But more importantly so, it's the ability for you to create your own information base that you can then build wisdom from. So our students from the ages of 12 onwards are taught what AI is and how it can be meaningful in their lives. We also explain to them the difference between criterion referencing and Harvard referencing. If you understand that Harvard referencing is the source of information and criterion referencing references the question that is being asked, you do those two things together, you can get away from any AI detector, and more importantly, you understand information. So those are the two biggest skill sets that we teach our children, and I think every child on the planet should be taught that.
There's one thing that is for certain in life is that you can't make everybody happy. You're still going to find parents who are stuck in 2010, who still want to do education the way it used to be. I think they're becoming a minority though, but how do you deal with those type of parents?
I'm fortunate enough to be at a conference in a couple of weeks' time, and one of the things that I'm starting off with the conference with, and it's the same way I address a parent from 2010, is I ask them about a date stamped back in the time, and they'll tell me 500 years BC, and 500 years BC stood for before Christ. That's changed now. It's no longer BC. It's BCE. And they'll say to me, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's called the Common Era. So it was before the Common Era and after the Common Era." So then they'll say to me, "Well, when did that change?" I said, "Well, if you follow the internet and you understand how things work and how work societies create oppressions and depressions in our learning spaces, you need to be more aware of what's happening." And that's generally a trigger point for somebody because it's something that they've built their fundamental growth and understanding points on. We also offer conventional schooling in our schools. So for parents that are stuck in the medieval times, BCE, they are more than able to do conventional schooling. But I think from a practical application point, we don't have all the answers. We know that, and we're one solution of many, but we're a practical solution. The practical solution is South Africa, you are cash strapped. To pay for your child to get a degree is going to cost you a fortune. To send your child to a private school is going to cost you a fortune. Where you can come to us, get an honours degree in literally 3 years for the same price that you pay for schooling. What's not to understand?
Now, I think we could all agree that talent is evenly distributed, right? It's not about how much money your mommy and your daddy has. Now, having said that, the question is, how does generation actually cross that divide between parents who they've got the resources to give their kids the best education through what you're delivering. But then you find parents in, Dunoon, Joe Slovo, and lots of other areas that are much more destitute. How do you help solve education for them?
Yeah, so it's a good question, always a difficult question. So there's a well-known large fund in our country, which I'm not going to mention, and if they're listening, hi. I had a conversation with them, and they were like, "Well, what would it cost for you to do this on scale? So if you could do 1 million students on your model and guarantee them a degree, what would it cost us per annum per child?" I got the number down to 12,000 Rand for the year per child per year. When I explained this to them, they said to me they were looking for something closer to 100 Rand per month, which would equate to 1,200 Rand per child per year. And I realized at that moment in time that I was in the wrong room, and what they were looking for is for the impossible. And I think that's the problem in our country, is that there are solutions. 12,000 Rand a year for a child on a scale of 1 million people, and you do this over a 3-year period, that means 1 million people in 3 years will have a degree at 12,000 Rand per annum per child. And I think that's the difficult part that I struggle with, is that there are people that can make things like this happen, but they're not. And my attention, and I've seen this happen with many South Africans, my attention has now moved to the Middle East. So I'm spending a lot of time in Oman and Qatar, Kuwait, and the viewpoint that the Middle East has is that one of these countries will be the first country on the planet to make it compulsory that in school you get a degree. Now just imagine that. Imagine one country, so let's take Oman for example, with 4.6 million people. They make a compulsory that every child that goes to school leaves with a degree. You change education. Overnight, the world changes because everyone else will have to adopt. I do this in the Gambia, I work in Botswana, Zimbabwe. Our country has the right people, but it's extremely difficult. Anybody in education in South Africa will tell you the same thing.
Well, there you heard it. Jevron's got a plan. Maybe you want to be part of it. You can reach out to him. I'm happy to connect you. Kino, Kieno, at innovateafrica.news. That's how to get hold of me. My email will also be at the end of this particular show. It'll be there, all the spelling and all the other things that you're looking for. But Jevron, let's move on and just talk about the fact that, and I say it's a fact, it does take a village to raise a child. What type of support are you getting hyperlocally or otherwise to give young people going through your system, that edge, that advantage? And by the way, I know you're more than just degrees. You also deal with the trades, I believe.
In our trade schools, we specialize from 16 to 19. And through the great work of the Youth Employment Services, which is probably one of the only government initiatives that I've seen actually work, we've taken students out of townships, out of poverty, and providing them with the ability to become plumbers and electricians. That works well for us. What we then do is we get their first year's employment paid for through Youth Employment Services. And then what we get is we get the employer to pay us the institution for their tuition. And that is a good model because they're making 1,600 Rand swing from tuition fees to employability. They don't have the staff on their books for the first year, gives them a good trial period and gives the student the ability to prove themselves. So that does work well. So there are some government initiatives that work well specifically in the trade sector, and specifically from a country that's a third world country, there's a huge demand for the trades and for proficient workers. When it comes to the degrees, though, in terms of being able to have higher order thinking, I think it's important that even these students that are doing these trades should have the ability to study further on.
Teacher skills is something we haven't spoken about. Who teaches these teachers the skills? Because when you go to your normal colleges, they're not teaching you about AI and other future skills. They're not necessarily teaching you about the trade. So who teaches the teacher in a generation context?
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough that when Cambridge came out with their professional development qualifications, which are built towards degrees, that we became the first provider of them online. So we've taught more than 360 teachers from Bosnia to the Middle East, all the way through to Europe. What we do is we have a certificate, which is 25 weeks. We have a diploma, which is 52 weeks. And we have a guaranteed PGCE into 2 universities in the UK, one being Anglia Ruskin University and the other one being St. Mary's, both providing the teacher the ability to do IQTS, making them an international teacher. So we train our own staff. The problem that you have in South Africa is if teaching is meant to be a professional body, where's the professional development for this professional body? And I could spend hours trying to talk about SACE and what they could be doing and what they should be doing, but it is even difficult for them to exist. So instead of complaining, we build our own professional development and we build our own teachers. And without that, our schools wouldn't be able to exist.
Jevron, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. I love the fact that you are a maverick. You break the mold. You find ways of doing the right thing, even if it doesn't fit into that neat little box that we've been used to for over 150 years in education. I really, truly respect that. That is what we need in the education system. We need more of that. We need more courageous people. We need people who can find ways of doing the right thing, even though other people might frown on it. So as far as Innovate Africa is concerned, that to me is the future of education, at least one of the streams, one of the ways of us achieving the type of future that we're looking out for. So I'll see you next week, and remember to reach out to me. The email address will be up. If there's someone you think I should be interviewing, maybe you doing some interesting stuff, maybe you're a really innovative business and you're impacting lives, and I've not been talking about you, reach out, let's chat, and I'm wishing you a phenomenal rest of your week.